Class is in session, hitting the books, Pub Sports Radio, Tuesday, September the 6th, the rare Tuesday edition of the show. Ian Cameron, Conor Mac, ready to get you ready for our second week of the college football season. We'll preview the 2 Friday night games, the only 2 weeknight games this week in college football, and many big games coming up on Saturday as well. Conor Mac, was a crazy first week. Where do we start with? Penn State, Purdue was crazy. West Virginia, Pitt on Thursday was crazy. Indiana, Illinois, Friday night went down to the wire. The craziness with North Carolina, App State. How about East Carolina, NC State? Oh, how about Houston, UTSA, which almost made Jose. We almost had to put him get the straitjacket out, I'm sure, after that game and the way they lost that, the Roadrunners. It was a crazy week 1 of college football. Florida State, LSU on Sunday night. I mean, crazy games left and right.
Yeah, they were wild. That UTSA game, I had a little bit money line with them, but I just wanted to cover. And then I'm just going, when an OT game, well, finally they changed the rule after the third, so it was good. But man, you're just going back and forth because you're either going to cover there or you might not. Team scores a touchdown, they don't get anything, you don't cover there. So wild week, but a good week, and I'm ready for week 2 here. I'm ready to get ripping.
Yeah, we all are. So let's get right to it. We've got 2 games Friday night. They're the first 2 games of the week in college football. We will start with a very interesting matchup of ACC versus AAC. Louisville taking on Central Florida. In this one, we've got UCF 6-point home favorites, 6.5 actually, depending on where you look right now. The total currently 61.5 across the board in this game. Louisville certainly a candidate for maybe one of the worst team performances of week 1. It was just an absolute debacle for them against Syracuse. A horrible game. Malik Cunningham with 2 interceptions, also lost a fumble. I don't think it could have gone any worse for him. A guy that was a lot of expectations coming into the season, a guy with a lot of experience that should be able to play better than that, but definitely did not against Syracuse. And look, let's give Syracuse's offense credit. They moved the ball with a great deal of success. Garrett Schrader, the quarterback, looked solid for Syracuse. Tucker, the running back, just incredible. A great running back for Syracuse, ran the football effectively against that Louisville defense. And then, of course, and Robert Anaya, the new offensive coordinator, man, a guy that did a great job at Virginia with that offense last year. Look at how explosive it was with that Brennan Armstrong passing attack. Robert Anaya was the architect of that, the OC there. He goes to Syracuse, and already you're seeing that this could be a better offense this year, and Louisville just couldn't do anything to stop it last week. So it's a bounce back spot for Louisville. Central Florida, now look, they had a very easy week 1 game. They took care of business, but I'll tell you what, even though it was an FCS opponent for UCF, John Reese Plumlee looked very good, very comfortable in this offense, looked like he was very well acclimated, a perfect fit, in my opinion, for Gus Malzahn and what he wants to do, a run-oriented spread, up-tempo offense, but with a mobile quarterback element. That's always been key. That I think Gus has had his best offenses going back to when he was with Auburn, for the quarterback that can move, and John Reese Plumlee can definitely do that for UCF. So I'll be honest. I mean, it's you don't want to overreact to Louisville being that bad against Syracuse. It's one of those weeks where you don't overreaction versus underreaction. But to me, after what I saw against Louisville, I think UCF's right there with Cincy and Houston in this conference. I think it's very possible for them to be able to win and cover this game, especially, a Friday night game at the Bounce House there in Orlando. I could definitely see that being a good environment, and I would lean to UCF right now early in the week. That was an alarm bell type of performance from Louisville. Connor, what are you thinking here, Louisville, UCF?
Yeah, this game should be crazy. You talked about Bounce House on Friday night. Louisville with Cunningham, the 3 turnovers, it's the good and the bad with him. I don't know, it's been this way for 3 years now. And just surprising how they took care of Syracuse the last few years, and they get rolled over. Their problem was Syracuse ran all over them. And Bowser and company, Plumlee's just got to do well, I think, at home in this one. I lean to UCF. Under Satterfield, Louisville hasn't been good as a road dog. And I think it'll be tough for them. I know we don't want to overdo it week 1. I think Cunningham, they'll score as well. What I'm looking to this game, which I was looking at already last night, even Sunday night, is the over. Even this high total, I think there's points in this one. I think Louisville will be able to score. I still don't love UCF's defense. They should put up in the 30s. So even though this total's high at 61.5, I'd lean over here early.
Yeah, leaning toward points being scored, 61.5, the total here in this game. And again, UCF laying 6.5. So Connor leaning over. Early in the week, at least, I'm leaning toward the home favorite here. I certainly think UCF could be able to win this one by 7 or more. A lot of people were high on Louisville. I wasn't one of them. I was taking more of a wait-and-see approach, and I didn't see a whole lot from Louisville last week against Syracuse that impressed me. All right, the second game Friday night, we've got Boise State taking on New Mexico. A little Mountain West conference game here early in the season. Boise State, 16.5-point road favorites here in Albuquerque. The total 44. That's come down from 46.5. And so we've seen money come in on the under. We've seen some money come in on Boise, 15.5 up to 16.5. Boise State's right up there, too, in terms of teams that had absolute dog shit performances in week one. I mean, Boise State was just absolutely dominated by Oregon State last weekend, and I couldn't believe the amount of money that came in on Boise. And not so much that people thought Boise was good, but just, kind of the disrespect for Oregon State that they kept on getting, for a team that has consistently improved under Jonathan Smith, Chance Nolan at quarterback, a good run game, very much an improving defense. That's the part that has come of that team, Oregon State, that has just improved so much the last couple of years. They can now get stops on the defensive side of the football when that wasn't the case a few years ago. And Boise State was just unable to do anything, and it was shocking. Like, even I was stunned that Oregon State was that effective on defense against Boise State. Hank Bachmeier was atrocious. It was a horrible game for him. He didn't even finish the game. He ended up getting pulled last week in that game against Oregon State. Talon Green actually finished the game. And now both Green and Bachmeier, as of yesterday, were splitting first-team reps in practice. So that tells you right now Andy Avalos is maybe seriously considering a quarterback switch here after just one game. And he might go to Talon Green and not go with Hank Bachmeier here in this game. So problems for Boise on offense, and it was shocking because we heard about this offensive line was much better. Bachmeier's got tons of experience. They got George Halani healthy. They're good running back. And to see them just get shut down was a really stunning turn of events, to be just totally inept offensively. Now, on the flip side, you got New Mexico. They beat Maine 41-0 last week, played an FCS team. I actually think the team could be a little bit improved this year, New Mexico, coming into this season. Miles Kendrick, transfer quarterback from Kansas, played last week. Dual threat, can run. Actually was pretty good in terms of his efficiency, 14 of 17, 170 yards. Did have 2 interceptions, so he's definitely going to want to get rid of that. But, after what I saw from Boise State last week, I am in no particular hurry to be laying 16.5 points with them on the road. This is now starting to look like a program that just ain't what it once was. It ain't what it once was under Chris Peterson. Hell, it ain't what it once was under Brian Harsin just a few years ago. Even Brian Harsin at least got this team to 9 wins, 10 wins, contending for Mountain West titles. Now, it's one game, obviously, against a good Oregon State team. Could they bounce back? Yes, but I honestly don't love the feel around this program right now, the vibe around this program. I certainly don't like the trajectory. It seems like they're going down, not up. I just don't want to lay 16.5. Not that many points. The total's gone down, and I could agree with that. Boise State's defense is probably still, I think, their strength compared to their offense. And look, Oregon State's got an offense. It's probably going to be a step down in class for this Boise defense going up against this New Mexico offense, which is, a little bit more slow it down, run heavy offense going into this game. So I can understand why bettors are flocking toward the under here for this Friday night Mountain West matchup. Conor Mac, what are you thinking here? Boise State, New Mexico.
Yeah, real quick, I got to give a quick shout out to the chat. Ronnie and Bergia, what's up, my man? Gaming Heavy, Heavy, what's up, my dude? Good to see you. I got Transcan up here, Jake Kaiser, Mike M, G Martinez, good to see you. Yeah, and now Bachmeier gets pulled so quick. I mean, Green wasn't much better. I mean, he moved the ball a little bit. He threw a pick. He ran it okay. Kind of a dual threat guy. I think this is a game to get back on track. Just not an easy place at New Mexico. I kind of lean Boise. If you like him, maybe take him first half, but there's nothing going off of that game at Oregon State. I know you and me were kind of the rare. I know Ragu liked it. A lot of people like Boise. I just didn't see it. And that line came crashing down basically from 4 to almost a pick 'em by kickoff. And it showed. But I don't know how much Kendrick can do. Like he talked about, still threw 2 picks, even though they just beat up on Maine in this one. and it's already hit to the under. I obviously like that. This has come down to 44. So I have nothing. This is a game I'm probably just going to watch. And if you really believe in Boise and think they get it done, maybe you look at them, like I said, first half. But this is a wait and see. I think New Mexico's a little bit better, but Boise should go in there and win this game. By margin, I don't know, but I think they win here.
All right, win, but the question of by 17 or more, that's the dubious proposition. All right, UTSA Army, as we move to Saturday's action, we've got the Road Runners, meet, 2-point road favorites here, 56 the total. And certainly the thing that stands out from a spot perspective is what's left in the tank for UTSA. I mean, that was just a physical, emotional roller coaster ride of a football game against I think what you could consider an in-state rival. Do they play every year, Houston, UTSA? No, but that's a nice little rivalry developing considering Houston's a very solid program and UTSA has become a program worthy of respect the last couple of years. And it was just an incredible game. It ends up going to the third overtime, which now in college football is just an exchange of 2-point conversion attempts. And that's how that game was decided. And Houston made their 2-point try and UTSA did not get their first 2-point try, and that was the difference in the end for UTSA falling just short in a heartbreaker against Houston last week. So what has that game taken out of them now as they have to go on the road now all the way pretty much to the East Coast here against to take on this Army at West Point now. Big travel spot here, early game as well, noon Eastern on Saturday. Certainly it's not a UTSA spot. There's no question about that. This is a tricky, worrisome spot, potentially a bet against spot. But here's the problem with Army, and it's the same issue I have every single year with Army. It's that when push comes to shove, is this team going to be able to get some stops for me, on the defensive side of the football? I mean, we've seen Army, it seems like last year, it seems like the year before, every time they've gone up against a capable offensive team, they've had their problems. And, Coastal Carolina last week, the 38-28 loss for Army, that was a Coastal Carolina team that they did have Grayson McCall, their quarterback, returning. They had some O-line replacing to do. They had new faces on the O-line, a few new faces along the skill position groups at running back and wide receiver. And yet there was Coastal Carolina pretty much doing whatever they wanted offensively against Army. And that's the concern here because, look, UTSA's got a solid offense, and they showed it against Houston. Houston's got a great defense. UTSA's offense was succeeding and moving the ball and having success. Frank Harris and that offense moved the ball against a great defense. They're not facing a great defense here, facing this Army team. So I'm actually leaning to points in this game because I could see the UTSA defense, look, after last week, played their hearts out, could see them maybe a little bit gas tank on empty physically, having to roar back and play another strong defensive game, and you got to prepare for the triple option. Coming off that kind of just an exhausting, taxing game against Houston, that may not be easy. So I'm not looking at a side. I mean, certainly if you look at it from a spot perspective, you got to lean Army, but I don't trust this defense of Army to get stops when they need to. And that continues to be the issue I find when they play above average teams and above average offenses. So yeah, I can't take UTSA in this spot. But the Army matchup concerns with their defense are probably going to keep me off Army and actually make me look toward the over in this game instead. What do you think here, CMAC, UTSA Army?
Yeah, they're raising, kind of these totals. Obviously, they're playing UTSA, like Seamus just put in there. That last week they couldn't keep it under. This Army defense they got gashed. And that Coastal team, like you talked about, it was a newer defense, but on offense, obviously they had McCall, and he was efficient, 12 for 17, 3 touchdowns, 174. But they ran all over Army, and that's not a good sign for them here. But I think they'll be able to move it against UTSA. Like you talked about, just a crazy game back and forth. Man, I thought they could have won it there at home. It was difficult. I think they'll be able to run it here with Harris. They'll have an easy time against Army. But you talked about early game. I think the total's kind of right there. I was thinking like it would be 55 to 57. We got right here at 56. So I still might get over. This is a game I'm going to watch and see. I think there's a little bit with Army. I think if you were getting over a field goal, I'd feel better with taking them. So this one's a good old-fashioned watch for me early.
Yeah, it was Reese White and C.J. Beasley. They just ran amok for Coastal Carolina against this Army team last week. They combined for over 200 rushing yards. So that run D. And look, UTSA is still a run-first offense. They still want to be throwing the football based off the run. That's what they want to do. So this should be a setup for offensive success here for the
Yeah.
Roadrunners. But I'm worried
Real
about
quick,
all the
Harris made
snaps
some
that
great
defense.
throws though
Yep.
in that game though. I mean, if
Yep.
he could throw it like that, obviously he's
Yes.
very talented.
Yep.
But I thought he played great.
I think his throwing ability from day one that he stepped on UTSA campus as the starting quarterback, he's progressively gotten better throwing the football. No question about that. His accuracy, he was putting the football right in a thimble in some of those throws that he made. That throw he made to get the touchdown in overtime, it was just perfect, right in between the defender, right into the hands of his receiver. It had to be thrown just perfectly, and it was. So his accuracy throwing the ball downfield has gotten a lot better. No question for Frank Frank Harris for UTSA. All right, Missouri, Kansas State next up. We've got Kansas State 7.5, 8-point home favorites here, 57 the total in this one. So I cashed a ticket with Missouri. Really felt good about them last week against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech's new coaching staff, kind of starting over here, and Missouri, bringing back Brady Cook at quarterback now in the I believe third or fourth season now for Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach. It was just a good setup for them to get off to a good start, and they did that 52-24. They ended up getting a blowout win and point spread cover against Louisiana Tech. This is going to be more difficult, though, now. You're going to go on the road, face a Kansas State team that, coming into this season, there was a lot of people thinking this would be a pretty solid football team this year. The question for me was going to be, I think the defense is good. I love the running back, Deuce Vaughn. I think the receiving corps is improved. They're going to be able to play good defense. It's always been the way it's been under Chris Kleiman here with the Wildcats since he's been there. But at the end of the day, can we get quarterback play from Adrian Martinez that is going to make this team take that team to the next level, Kansas State? And I'm still wondering. I mean, it was not they didn't ask him to throw the ball much against South Dakota last week in that 34-0 win. They didn't really have to because they're having such success with Deuce Vaughn running the football. Now you're facing a better team. You're facing an SEC team. You're facing a team now where you're going to have to make some plays throwing the football. So, that's going to be the question mark here for Martinez here against Missouri. Again, Missouri's going on the road right now, but, with this Missouri team, I look at them as a team that when you're getting them with, catching more than a touchdown, getting them in the underdog role, their defense is still a little bit leaky. There were times Louisiana Tech moved the ball on them, but I still think compared to last year, what I saw last week, their defense is improved. It's hard not to be because it was just so bad last year, the Missouri defense. But, I think their offense is capable here with Brady Cook and company. I wouldn't be looking to lay more than a touchdown with Kansas State. It's tough because I think personnel-wise, Connor, you grade out these rosters. You got to like Kansas State's roster a little bit more than Missouri, but I don't love the quarterback. I still don't trust Adrian Martinez. It's one thing to, play mistake-free, clean football, rely on the run game because you can just overpower a weak South Dakota Coyotes team. Well, now you're playing Missouri. It's not going to be easy to have that, be able to win in the trenches like you did last week. You're going to have to ask Martinez to do something for you throwing the football in this game. So I'm leaning Mizzou. Total 57. I'm still not ready to bet Missouri games under. That's for sure. But be careful because Kansas State's going to want to slow this down. They do have a pretty good defense. So it's kind of a clash here where Kansas State probably correlates with under. Missouri probably correlates with over in this game. But I think Kansas State can still move the ball against Missouri. So I'm leaning over and I'm leaning to the dog. What do you think, Connor, here? Missouri, K-State.
I'm with you here too a little bit on Missouri games. I don't really want to jump to an under, especially at this number. What are we going to get though? I like Kansas State. What you're talking about, add a touchdown or just over here, right around anywhere 7.5 to 8. I just don't trust Martinez. I'm sorry to say, and that'll keep me maybe from taking K-State. And I got to see it just consistently. He can make plays, but he just makes mistakes. Kind of like Bo Nix. It's just what these guys are. They just make mistakes consistently. I look to just keep it to Vaughn, run it, try to, get Martinez to roll out, use his legs, and be safe with the ball, little play action, stuff like that. I think K-State's the better team here. It's just, do they cover? I'm not so sure. They beat La Tech, a team that's kind of gone downhill. They scored a little bit. Yeah, I don't trust their defense. I think these numbers are pretty spot on. The total's right there. This is a good number. So this is nothing for me here early.
Yep. I'll tell you what, it's the Adrian Martinez vindication. You're right. What we're seeing with Nebraska, But at the same time, he's still a problematic quarterback. I know Nebraska's still having a tough start to the season. They struggled from start to finish with North Dakota last week. They had the loss to Northwestern, and obviously Martinez can't be blamed now because he's gone. But
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying.
Martinez has still got
He's
issues. Like, well, he
come on.
still does. Yeah,
We're not ragging the guy. It's just a fact.
yeah,
We're gambling here.
yeah,
So when I hear people like, rag on this guy, I'm not ragging. That's just he is what he is, and
yeah.
I'm just saying when you're gambling here and like over a touchdown to cover a game like this, just be leery. That's all.
Yeah. He was part of many problems Nebraska had last year and 2 years ago. But
He
now
still got problems.
he's gone, and there's still the other set of problems that Nebraska has: coaching and game management and penalties and bad defense at times and interceptions from the quarterback. Now it's Casey Thompson having those issues right now a little bit for Nebraska. But that's another story. All right. Next up, as we continue along here, by the way, hit the like button. We appreciate it. This is a good one in the SEC. South Carolina and Arkansas. Arkansas 8.5 point home favorites here, 53.5 the total in this one. So Arkansas beat Cincinnati last week. Very good win against a good Cincinnati team, 31-24. But boy, there was some good fortune involved for Arkansas. Cincinnati was moving the ball many times throughout that football game against Arkansas. And it was a Ben Bryant interception. They're deep in Arkansas territory. And when you look at the yardage for the game, it was pretty much an even football game, even though Arkansas won 31-24. So it's kind of like Cincinnati, they very easily could have won that game. I mean, if you watched it, it was a very even football game. Arkansas did what they had to do. They forced some turnovers. Their defense was very opportunistic in that game, and they took advantage of that at the end of the day because they had a lost fumble, Cincinnati. They had an interception from Bryant, and definitely that was good. Meanwhile, Jefferson at quarterback for Arkansas, KJ Jefferson played a clean game, 18-26, 223 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, relied on Raheem Sanders to run the football, which he did very effectively, 117 yards rushing on 20 carries in that football game. So he's basically averaging well over 5 yards per clip running the football. So Arkansas was very solid in that regard. But, they're coming off that big win, and they're playing a South Carolina team that, as much as I like Arkansas and think they're a team I want to back, and obviously they got the win in the cover, as long as you got them laying 6.5 or less last week, I kind of feel that same way about Shane Beamer here and the South Carolina Gamecocks. And for them, 35-14 against, a Georgia State team that I think has the chance to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Sun Belt this year.
Oh, yeah.
That was a solid win for South Carolina last week. Spencer Rattler in his South Carolina debut struggled early, but then he started to settle in, make some plays. He still has probably room for improvement. 23 of 37, 227 passing yards, 1 touchdown, but he did have 2 picks. He's going to have to iron that out. But, they were very good on special teams. And sometimes you're going to want to keep an eye on this sort of thing because you look at South Carolina, they had some big kick return touchdowns. They had 2 block punt returns for a touchdown, 2 in the same game to turn that from 20-14 to 35-14. Now you could say, well, they're very fortunate, misleading that they won by 21. 2 of their touchdowns were on a block punt, but at the same time, special teams always goes totally unnoticed by the betting markets. So if you can find these teams that are good on special teams, and it's not often priced that way into the lines, into the numbers, you could take advantage of a team like South Carolina. So, in this spot, I'm leaning to the Gamecocks a little bit. I mean, I thought Arkansas is one of those teams where last year I thought was the ultimate value to back them. This year, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. People are more aware of how good Arkansas is and the job Sam Pittman's done, whereas South Carolina is that commodity that might have that year Arkansas had last year, that they have that, step up on the rise type of team in South Carolina, because I can't say enough about how well I think they're coached by Beamer. I think Beamer's doing a hell of a job. He had guys that were grad assistants, and he had guys that started the year as coaches like Zeb Nolan trying to play quarterback for him last year, and yet he still managed to have that team competitive, in a lot of weeks and a decent enough record. So I'm not selling South Carolina short. I'd rather honestly bet on these teams than bet against them. But given a choice, I'm leaning South Carolina here. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, we talked last week. The only reason why I loved Arkansas was under that touchdown because I just thought Jefferson was the difference. Like we talked about, that was the key. At the key positions, Arkansas was better, and their defense looked so good in that first half. Just some injuries, getting a little leaky, and the points started rolling in. On the other side with South Carolina, you talked about how good the special teams are. I mentioned in the Florida State LSU game. Look up these, like I did for the game, the live stream. Look up the kickers and the punters. They were both teams have two different guys going in, and look at guys muff punts, block punts, and we know South Carolina always that with Beamer. That's a big key for them here at South Carolina.
Chip off the old block.
Yep, just like his dad. Spencer Rattler was pretty good. You know, he had a few picks early. I was worried about they were 3 of 14 on third down, which wasn't great. I like this. It opened at 9.5. I didn't jump on it. I think as long as it's still here at about 8.5. I like the points a little bit as well. I think Arkansas is the better team. So I lean to the points here with the Gamecocks a little bit.
All right. Next up, we've got Alabama and Texas, obviously one of the marquee games on Saturday, without a doubt, and a noon Eastern, 11 a.m. local time start and kickoff in Texas here. Alabama right now, 20 to 20.5 point favorites, 20 pretty much across the board, 64.5 the total, which has gone up from 62.5. I mean, unless Alabama's leading by a massive margin late and they take the air out of the football, they melt the clock, which is exactly what they did last week against Utah State. How they could have put 60 on the board probably against Utah State. The more I watch Alabama and Georgia, the more I think it's them, and then everybody else is just lagging behind. I mean, what they are able to do to teams that are not bottom feeders, these aren't dregs that Alabama and Georgia kicked the living snot out of this past weekend. Alabama just laid waste to the Mountain West champions from last. That was the Mountain West champions from last year, Utah State. And Alabama,
I thought they'd score. They didn't even score. I mean, shit.
And Alabama just treated them like they're, Bethune-Cookman or something on Saturday. I mean, that's not chopped liver. Holy gosh. I mean, that's Utah State, Mountain West champions from last year. Unbelievable dominance once again by Alabama, as usual, in that 55-0 whipping over Utah State. And they took it easy on Utah State. Like I said, they only got a touchdown, 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, and they pulled everybody and they just melt the clock after that. I mean, if they wanted to, they could have hit 70. Seriously. I mean, if they went full bore for 4 quarters against Utah State last weekend, that's unbelievable. And if you think that's unbelievable, Georgia with that 49-3 ass kicking. Oregon's not chopped liver. They've only been one of the best teams in the Pac-12 for years, and Georgia kicks the shit out of them. But the point is, Alabama and Georgia are just at such a different level right now. It's absolutely insane. And I ain't stepping in front of them. Yeah, is this line rich? Of course it is. They're laying almost 3 touchdowns on the road against a Texas team that's very capable, that's got Quinn Ewers, who I thought did an excellent job in his debut, now against Monroe last week, but I think he's going to be an excellent quarterback for them. I love the look, too, long hair and the beard. It's great. It's like he's been in the mountains. I think he's going to be a really nice quarterback for them. But here's the problem, all right? I ain't stepping in front of Alabama. I ain't. And the problem with betting on it, but I ain't betting on them either, because my number only had this at 19. And here we are 20.5 with Alabama. So, but at the same time, I'm not looking, there's not a number that I say, you know what, if this gets to 21.5, I'm taking Texas. No. That is how scary right now Alabama is. Both sides of the football. Bryce Young and that offense. The defense is just absolutely terrific as well. Richardson's going to be up for the Heisman as well on the defensive side of the football for this Alabama team. And at the end of the day, you think Saban and Alabama was taking Utah State seriously. Here they are playing Texas, national TV on Fox. And I believe this is the first time, I think if off the top of my head, it's the first time Gus Johnson will be doing play-by-play for an Alabama game. I don't think he's ever done an Alabama game for Fox, but here he is doing one for a change. And Alabama's too good right now, period. and I ain't stepping in front of them. The first half, I was worried that it was 28 for a full game point spread of 42. Like you weren't getting a bargain, and yet they still easily covered the first half number. So, yeah, Alabama first half, if you won with it last week, if you've been riding it last year and 2 years ago, I wouldn't talk you out of taking that. But they just look like they're at a different level. And it would take at least 24, 24 and a half for me to even consider Texas. And even then, I may not bet Texas. That's how much I respect what Alabama's doing right now. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I would want more than that. I don't want 28 and a half. I got to see more. This is so early with Sarkisian at Texas. Um, this is not an easy one here. And I got to say, for me, this is pretty simple. Bama first half, roll tide. I think if you could get it around 10, I'm sure it might be a little higher, obviously, with this 9.5, 10. It might be, they juice it up now, so it's probably going to be 13 and a half. But I think they take care of business. I mean, I think they bottle up Robinson. I was just surprised how well the defense played because I thought Utah State would get some touchdowns there late. I thought they could move the ball at least in that second half, and they didn't. Texas is one of the best receivers in the country in Worthy. They got to get him the ball, and a start to Texas is key. To stay in this game early because I think if they get down, this could get ugly later in the second half. So I like Bama early and often.
All right, Bama early and often 11 and a half, by the way, that first half number for Alabama. All right, Tennessee, Pittsburgh. We've got Tennessee 6.5 point road favorite, 7 in some spots, a total 64 and a half in this game. Last year, I remember this game very well. It was a shootout, back and forth it went. But keep in mind, that was the Pittsburgh Mark Whipple throw the football around the lot offense that they had last year, play at a faster pace. When that game went over the total, Pitt's looking to slow it down this year. They were looking to get back to running the football, only have Keaton Slovis, throw the football off, being able to successfully run it on the ground. But having said all that, Pitt's game still flew over the total with West Virginia last week, 38-31, even though they were trying more of a ball control, time of possession, slow it down type of offense. Yet that game still ended up going over the total. When it comes to Tennessee, you're going to get a fast-paced, up-tempo, explosive offense led by Hendon Hooker. And boy, did they look the part against Ball State. 59 points in that 59-10 victory. Hooker was solid throwing the ball, 18 of 25, 221 passing yards. Gave way to Joe Milton because it was such a blowout. The run game was good with Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson. They all got involved running the football. Cedric Tillman, Jimmy Holiday, Ramel Keaton, big games catching the ball down the field in the passing game for Tennessee. Just a loaded offense. There's no question about that. It's going to be a big test for what's a very good Pitt defense, though. Pitt's defense in the trenches, solid offense, defense. They did struggle at times, though, with West Virginia and JT Daniels at home last week. I found the secondary, that might be a little bit of a weak link for Pitt. I mean, I thought they gave up too much cushion to West Virginia receivers last week. And, if you're struggling in your coverage down the field against West Virginia, how are you going to handle Tennessee's offense here this go around here? And a Tennessee team looking for some redemption after last year's 41-34 loss to Pitt in Knoxville. Pitt was a 3.5-point favorite last year in the meeting. They won 41-34. Like I said, 75 points. The game flew way over the total, but that total was 56. This one's 64 and a half, and I'm even seeing it up to 66 now in some spots. And Pitt's not trying to play as fast as they did last year. So it's one of those where I don't think I'd be too petrified to take it under, but to bet the game under. But at the same time, it was 56 last year. Pitt played faster. They're playing slower this year. Tennessee's still going to play the light warp speed with their tempo. But at the same time, you're seeing this total 10 points higher this year in the meeting between these two teams compared to last year. So it's just from a value standpoint, I did want to bet it over, but I don't know if the value's there. I'm kind of leaning Tennessee here. I don't love the idea laying points on the road, 6.5, 7, and I don't know if I'll bet it, but I'd lean a little bit to the Vols in this one. I don't know if Keaton Slovis, if that Pitt defense has those issues in the secondary, I don't know if this Pitt offense, unlike last year, has it in them to match an offense like Tennessee point for point. What do you think here, Connor?
Maybe. I think they can a little bit. I wasn't crazy impressed, but I thought Slovis played well, threw for over 300. And one thing in that Tennessee game with Ball State, their quarterback Paddock, he threw. I think he had a 270 yards. They didn't score enough. They go down, miss field goal. They go down, go for it on fourth down.
And not
But
get
they
it.
move the ball on Tennessee. And I think even though it's 65, like with Tennessee games, I can only look over.
Yep.
They're an over
Oh, yeah.
machine. And then Pitt, I know different, quarterback, well, the whole deal, offensive coordinator, but they're 9-2 at home to the over. I think this is a back and forth shootout. And if I get over a touchdown, I'm going to lean to Pitt here. Even though much I like Tennessee and Hooker, I think it's a little bit too rich, but they just move it so quick. I could only be on the over. I just got to.
All right, liking the over. I agree. It would be over pass. Virginia, Illinois. Next up, we've got Illinois rather 4.5 point home favorites in this game. 57 being the total here in this one. Illinois. I mean, that was a Brett Bielema special or a Brett Bielema classic right there last week against Indiana. Had every opportunity to win that game. Should have probably won that game against Indiana last week, and they end up falling short. They let Connor Bazelak and that Hoosiers offense drive the football late and get the 23-20 victory over the Illini. That was a winnable football game. That was very disappointing to see them not get the job done and finish that off. What's concerning me here, Conor Mac? This secondary for Illinois last week, and we had the live bet stream on Pub Sports Radio last Friday night for Indiana, Illinois. Great job, as always, by Dabby Cab. Hosts many of those for us throughout the season. I was on that one, actually, for a little bit. Illinois secondary was giving up big plays in the passing game, and they looked like they were a little leaky back there with their pass defense. Well, now they're playing an opponent that could really take advantage of that. We know Virginia, with Brennan Armstrong, the quarterback, a team that we know last year is a team that threw the football a lot more than ran it. And when you're looking at so far, or last week, now they played Richmond. It was an FCS opponent. They won 34-17. Virginia had 42 rushing attempts, and they had 33 passing attempts. So it was a little bit more balance out of this Virginia offense. Last year, it was just insane that they barely ever ran the football, and when they did, it wasn't very effective, and they threw the football a ton. But it looks like they're trying to be a little bit more balanced. That being said, I think they will try to attack vertically. After what they saw last week, if I'm Virginia here and I'm Tony Elliott, the first-year head coach coming over from Clemson, I'm thinking we attack this Illinois secondary. Because, look, they played Wyoming in the first week, and Wyoming was ill-equipped from a passing standpoint to attack Illinois. They just weren't. It's like going to a knife fight with a butter knife. That's what Wyoming was doing against Illinois. Whereas last week we saw Bazelak and the Indiana offense attack that Illinois secondary with success. I think Virginia certainly has the quarterback to do that in Brennan Armstrong to be able to attack that Illinois defense a little bit in the secondary. On the flip side, Virginia, I still do have concerns about their defense a little bit, especially when you start to see that Richmond piled up 170 rushing yards against Virginia last week on 35 carries. Well, guess who's going to run the football a shit ton against you? Yeah, Illinois and Chase Brown. That's who. And they couldn't stop the run last week against Richmond. How are you going to stop this very strong, run-first, run-heavy Illinois offense with a terrific running back in Chase Brown? So I do think this is one of those back-and-forth games. I think it ends up being a shootout. And I know Illinois doesn't play with pace. They don't. They want to slow it down. But I think they're going to have efficiency, and they're going to break out some big runs in this game because Virginia's run defense is very shaky. It was last year, and it certainly didn't look that great against Richmond last week. So I think Illinois is going to be able to run the football against Virginia. And I think Virginia is going to be able to throw the football against Illinois' secondary, which gave up multiple big plays for either big plays or for touchdowns last week against Indiana. So I think both teams, the matchup dictates that I think they both have the offensive success they're looking for. Virginia's strength is throwing it. I think they can do so against Illinois. Illinois' strength is running it. I think they can do so against Virginia. So I like over the total in this game, and I lean to the dog just a little bit, but I think I prefer the total. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I just think the total might be a little bit too high, especially, here at 56. If it's over that, I'll look under in this one. I think Brown and them will just run it. That's what I wanted to get into, the 170 with Richmond. I think Armstrong does what they want. Illinois' got a pretty good D line, but their corners got picked on in the second. DeVito was okay. He threw a bad pick in the game. But at home here, I got to lean to them. I think Virginia might be a little bit better, but I wasn't impressed with the Richmond win. So I lean home here with Illinois. And at this point, I lean under.
Yeah, that is the one concern for me, like in the over here, and is the pace. You're right. Illinois is going to want to slow it down. You're going to have efficiency if it's going to go over the total when it's at 57. But it certainly feels like an over matchup because I think Illinois can run it and bust out big runs against Virginia, and Virginia can throw it against them. So going to end up seeing how that affects the total going into Saturday. But I think the efficiency will help. There's going to be enough efficiency for it to go over. Will it have the pace required to go over? All right, next up, we've got Houston and Texas Tech. One of the good matchups coming up on Saturday. We got Texas Tech currently in this one around a 3-point home favorite, 65.5 the total in this one. Houston, a massive win against UTSA, an incredible game. We mentioned it earlier when we talked about UTSA. And look, the defense made plays when they had. It wasn't a great game from a Houston defense that we think is going to be pretty solid this year, as the Roadrunners offense had some success. But, when they needed to stop late in the game, they got it, Houston's defense, and get the win against UTSA. But again, you're coming off that big comeback win, went 3 overtimes, it went to the 2-point conversion attempt exchange, part of the overtime, to get that victory. And now you got to go on the road and you got to play another tough game inside your own state against Texas Tech. Unfortunately for Texas Tech, because I was really lining up to maybe look toward the Red Raiders here. Certainly from a spot perspective, it was lining up pretty nicely for them. But quarterback injury to Tyler Shuck already. It's such a shame to see it because last year he had an injury that derailed the season. And again, last week he gets hurt and is now out for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Again to his collarbone, and a collarbone injury once again for him. So Donovan Smith will be taking over at the quarterback spot here for Texas Tech in this game. Smith was pretty solid last week when he came in for Tyler Shuck. But again, you have to remember this is going to be a much taller task for Texas Tech in this game, facing a Houston defense that, they had their hiccups, I guess you could say, last week. Did the Houston defense play as well as you would have wanted? No. But definitely Texas Tech's offensively going to find it much tougher sledding this week after the 63-10 scrimmage they essentially had last week against Murray State. So, and again, no Shuck, so you're going to see Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith can move, though. He's got some athleticism. His accuracy kind of comes and goes, but he's a guy that started a bunch of games for Texas Tech already. So he's not an inexperienced quarterback. I still lean Texas Tech a little bit, but obviously disappointing from their standpoint to see the news about Tyler Shuck. And give Clayton Tune credit. Rough start to the game, fourth quarter and overtime. That guy was terrific. Made all the plays, even ran the football, the flip into the end zone to score one of their the 2-point conversion that won the game for Houston. Give him credit. That guy's a competitor. He put his body on the line. He ran the football a lot more with that game on the line. And Clayton Tune's not necessarily a guy that's a running quarterback. We think of him more as a pocket passer, but that was a great gutsy performance by him after a bad start for him and that offense last week. I lean Tech, but just a lean as of right now. What are you thinking here, C-Mac? Houston, Texas Tech. Maybe with the quarterback change, this total might be a bit high. What do you think?
It is high. I don't know if I can get there. Yeah, with this total. I don't know if I bet this game at all, but I think Smith's pretty good. I think at home, this is not going to be easy. I like Houston. I don't think it was going to be easy against UTSA in that building. They end up winning, obviously not covering. I haven't seen enough from Tech. And last year they were so up and down. They'd have a couple big wins and they'd have these horrible losses, even at home. It seems like the defense seems a little bit better. I know they got some dangerous wideouts. Bradley, there's a few others. So maybe this is a shootout. And Houston has not been great as a road favorite. That's just it. They just haven't. And Tech's been pretty good here, ATS at home. So I'm with you. I lean Texas Tech here, just off the early line.
All right, leaning toward Texas Tech here early. Keep in mind, though, with Texas Tech, this is important to point this out. They are playing lightning fast pace-wise this year. Something definitely you want to keep in mind, because guess who they have right now coming over from Western Kentucky, of course, Kitley. You remember how quick and just how quick and up-tempo they were, that Western Kentucky offense last year with Bailey Zappi and Kitley, who's now with Tech, and they're playing that same warp speed pace. So keep that in mind. That's another reason why this total is so high with Houston and with Texas Tech. All right, Iowa State, Iowa, the annual battle, Cy-Hawk rivalry, if you will. We've got Iowa 3.5 point home favorites here in Iowa City, 39.5, 40 the total, and it's low for a reason. I mean, Spencer Petras, folks, he keeps getting worse, not better. I mean, honestly, last week against South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, just an absolutely make your eyes bleed, offensive performance from the entire team, but especially Spencer Petras. I mean, at home against South Dakota State, and you have 166 total yards of offense. 166 total yards of offense at home against South Dakota. And South Dakota State's a good FCS team. They are. No question about that. But that offense did not work. They were lucky that the defense, again, no surprise, looks to be pretty good again for Iowa. They were able to escape with a 7-3 victory as 10.5 point home favorites. What is this? Is this 1982 football again instead of 2022? 7-3 final score. And look at the box score for Petras. 11 for 25 throwing the football, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a paltry 109 passing yards in that game. I ain't laying anything with this offense. Not a thing. The defense looks amazing once again for Iowa. I'll give them credit. But I can't lay more than a field goal with this offense and how inept it is. And let's be honest, last year they had some games where they put up big points. A lot of it was turnovers forced by the defense, defensive scores, setting up the offense in short fields where they were already in field goal range to put up points. Last year, even in the games that they did score points, it wasn't like Iowa's offense was doing it or was responsible for it or was moving the football up and down the field. It was the defense giving them short fields. So unless that's happening again, or they're getting pick sixes and fumble return touchdowns and all this shit, I cannot with this offense. What I saw down the stretch from it last year when it was totally inept, and what I saw last week in their opener against South Dakota State, I can't lay more than a field goal with this offense. I just cannot do it. Rivalry game, dog or pass for me, under or pass for me. I don't know where the points come from. Iowa State does have a new quarterback. He did play well last week, Hunter Deckers, very well, in fact, but 42 points against Southeast Missouri State. You're facing a much different defense now, and you're going on the road as well. So, it's lean dog. It's lean to the under for me in this one. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, this should be just the old dog fight of a game with these two. Some of these games, I don't remember them playing this early in the season, but maybe they have. It always seems like they play a little bit later. That offense, that was just crazy to watch. I mean, a field goal and 2 safeties to get that 7 points. Petras should be a bit better. Is he this bad? Is it just game 1? I don't know. I'm with you. I don't want to touch this game. Not right now. It's always a close one. I'd lean under, but we're talking 41 total here. So, yeah, early look, I'd lean under.
All right. Hit the like button, everybody in the chat. We thank you very much for joining us. Poker Addicted, great comments from you and everybody else joining us here on this this week 2 college football edition of Hitting the Books. We appreciate it. All right, Kansas and West Virginia. The West Virginia Mountaineers now 13-point home favorites here in Morgantown. And this total's gone up. It opened 56.5. It's up to 59.5, 60 now, pretty much across the board. I actually am in action with side and total already in this game. I'm on the Jayhawks here. Kansas plus the points. I mean, for West Virginia, that was an emotional renewal of the backyard brawl last week against Pittsburgh. A game that West Virginia was leading, and then all of a sudden things fell apart in the fourth quarter. How many tip passes resulting in interception did we see last week in college football? And of course, we had one here in the West Virginia Pitt game that was a pick 6 for Pitt in that game that totally turned it around. I did see a lot that I liked from the offense, actually, of West Virginia. JT Daniels played all right. And again, they've got a brand new type of offensive system this year that Neil Brown is employing as the head coach. What he ended up doing was bringing in Graham Harrell as his offensive coordinator. Remember, he was Texas Tech quarterback with Leach many, many years ago. Was most recently USC's offensive coordinator with Clay Helton. He comes here to West Virginia, and all of a sudden, West Virginia's playing with pace, playing faster, an air raid, pass-heavy offense for JT Daniels. And look, it performed pretty well. I thought they'd actually move the ball for a large part of that game against what's supposed to be a very good Pitt defense. Pitt defense that brings back a terrific defensive line. Like we mentioned earlier, maybe some holes in their secondary, but West Virginia had a good amount of offensive success. They'll probably have some offensive success here because, look, Kansas is still not a finished product on defense. That's still where they have ways to improve, ways to go. But I think Kansas can score some points against West Virginia. I did not really feel that impressed by West Virginia's defense. Abanaconda ran the ball well for Pitt against them last week. Keaton Slovis, we talked about it earlier. He looked way more comfortable than I expected against that West Virginia defense that definitely gave up some plays, gave up some yards on the ground through the air. And this Kansas offense, last week they put up a huge number, and it was against Tennessee Tech. So I don't want to, totally go crazy about what they did. But, I like what I'm seeing from Lance Leipold's team on the offensive side of the football. They started to get that offense going down the stretch late last season. Keep that in mind. I was impressed by it. Jalen Daniels, the quarterback, had a solid game for Kansas last week, throwing the ball. They got a great rushing performance from Devin Neal. It looked like they could have something there, and him as a running back for this Kansas team. This offense looks like it's got some pieces to it. And slowly but surely, Lance Leipold is going to, I think, gradually have this team more and more and more competitive. They're still ways away from being, a great, good, or an above average team even in the Big 12. But they're getting there. There's improvement here. And when you factor in this spot for West Virginia, coming off the Pitt game, I think this is a defense that I thought was a little bit shaky against the Panthers last week. I'm not looking to lay 13 with West Virginia here. And I think Kansas all season long, I think if you bet Kansas, you're going to actually end up cashing a lot of tickets with them. I think they're going to have a winning season ATS this year. And I think this is the perfect spot for them to show that. So give me Kansas plus the points. And I agree with the move up in the total. I think it's going to end up being a shootout. Total's already gone up from 56.5 to 60. I agree with that move. C-Mac, what do you think? KU and West Virginia.
I do think Kansas will be better this year, and this is an interesting game for them to see what they got, like you talked about. I don't believe still, though, in their defense. I mean, I like what I saw out of Daniels. I think they'll be able to run it a little bit, but that defense still has holes. But we'll see, will West Virginia maybe not have such a crazy offensive game and their defense play better, because their defense kind of, got picked apart there. But I like what I saw out of Daniels. This is one, you're right, this could be a backdoor cover, but under 2 touchdowns, this is one I'm going to wait later on in the week, but I think maybe a first half, West Virginia here. You get under a touchdown, I think they can take care of business. They're always so good at home. This is where you want them. So I'm kind of looking first half here with West Virginia to get it done. But in the end, I think Kansas is a bit better, and maybe I'll look to back them at home. But still, I think this is short. Maybe last year this would be even more, 17. There's a little high hopes like you talked about in Kansas and Lawrence. But, I'm looking for the Mountaineers early here at home.
All right, West Virginia maybe early in this game to not have that Pitt hangover and be able to be chomping at the bit here to
I think they'll be
back
fine
at home against Kansas here. And this is going to be a statement for Kansas because, look, I think last year at this time, you'd be getting way more than 13, 14 points with Kansas in a spot like this. So they're already starting to give Kansas at least just a tiny bit of respect for some improvement. We'll see if it's warranted Saturday night, if they can hang within 2 scores on the road. And look, Kansas on the road has still been a very scary bet the last few years.
Yeah.
I mean, the road performances, they've still got to show that on the road it can be competitive. This will be a good test for them on Saturday. All right, next up, we've got UAB and Liberty. UAB 6-point road favorites here, 50 the total in this one. I laid it with UAB. I think Liberty, and I cashed a ticket with Liberty. They'd escape with the straight-up win against Southern Miss. But the reason I took Southern Miss plus the points last week is I think Liberty's a good notch or two down from last year. And it's not just losing Malik Willis. They lost some pieces on defense. And obviously the quarterback play, regardless of where they turn, is not going to be as good. And they've already got issues at the quarterback position in terms of health going into this game. Charlie Brewer, they transferred from formerly with Baylor. Then he went to Utah and struggled there and ended up leaving the team, got disgruntled, then went to Liberty. And here he is in the first game of the season. He gets hurt. Now he needs hand surgery, and he's going to be out 5 to 8 weeks, it looks like, due to injury. So talk about a disastrous start to his career at Liberty for Charlie Brewer. Guy is just snake bit right now. Doesn't play well. Now goes to Liberty for another chance, and then he gets hurt in week 1. So it looks like Hugh Freeze is going to have to decide between Jonathan Bennett and Caden Salter, who ended up finishing the game last week against Southern Miss. They both played in that game, and they had some good moments, and they had some absolutely terrible moments with interceptions and bad decisions. And now he's got to coach him up on the fly, get him ready for practice this week for this UAB team, which I think to me is still one of the better teams in Conference USA. That defense. Now, again, Bill Clark losing him, a surprise that he stepped down as head coach in the offseason, but one of his members of his coaching staff has taken over as the head coach. It should be a seamless transition. I don't think it's a huge detriment. We'll miss Clark because he's always had this program in a pretty solid shape in terms of one of the better teams in the conference. And look, last week they took care of business definitively against Alabama A&M 59-0, which you would expect. I just think there's a class difference right now, and Liberty, not just down from last year, they could be down a couple good notches from last year. That's kind of what I think, and after what I saw against Southern Miss, even though they escaped with the overtime win. Because as much as I think Southern Miss has improved this year, that was still a game where, Liberty was life and death to win it. And, if not for a late touchdown, they were going to lose that game to Southern Miss. I think UAB is more than good enough and more than superior to Liberty to, I think, be able to get this win by at least a touchdown. So at less than 7, I would lay it with the Blazers. What do you think here, CMAC, UAB, Liberty?
Just wanted to give a quick shout out to the guys in the chat. Williams Wrestling, what's up? Poker, Addicted, Moose Money, Jennifer, good to see you. Dabby Cab, Teaser King, Let's Go Wild Picks, great to see you, my man. Viper and B, James S, Mike M. Shout out to you guys. Hit the like button. UAB to me is a better team, and they played well on the road. Last year they were really good. I don't think it's much of a drop off, with the new coach like you talked about there. At Liberty, though, I think Salter should get the more of the snaps.
He did look better than Bennett. Yeah, I agree.
I thought he looked better as well. I don't know if I get involved here because I think UAB is the better team. And if you got it under a touchdown, you believe in them, I think that's the way to look in this one. Even to look at Liberty, just too many question marks, like you talked about. Still on their defense and now a quarterback. That's what's going on. So I'd want, if I were getting involved here, I want double digits with Liberty. So I'm with you a little bit. I lean with UAB.
All right, lean to UAB a little bit for Conor Mac. All right, next up here, Kentucky and Florida. SEC battle here, second week of the season. We got an SEC conference game here with the Gators hosting the Wildcats. Florida, 4.5-point home favorites down in Gainesville in the Swamp for a second straight game. 52.5 the total in this one. Isn't it interesting? Florida gets the huge win against Utah, and that was a great college football game. It wasn't great for my pocket because I liked Utah, and I bet Utah, and they fell short. Interception down in the final seconds from Cam Rising ended their chances, but that was a great college football game. No question. It was back and forth. It was very well played. It went right down to the end. Two very good teams. And look, give Florida credit. They found a way. They got the extra stop. And to be honest, if Anthony Richardson wasn't as incredible with his athleticism and his playmaking and his getting out of pressure, I mean, Utah had him dead to rights multiple times in that game, and he would just somehow get away, make a play down the field, either running the football or finding an open receiver in the passing game. This guy's always had talent. There's no question, and ability to be a game breaker. And Anthony Richardson kind of, finally realized that talent and potential a little bit against a great Utah team to be able to play like that. It was very outstanding. But isn't it interesting that all the money's come in on Kentucky here early in the week when Florida had this big win against Utah, looked great, and Kentucky, to be quite honest with you, struggled for over a half against Miami, Ohio last week at home. Isn't it interesting, though, when you see Kentucky look a little vulnerable, Florida looks so good against a terrific Utah team, and yet Kentucky's taking the money. I think that's very eyebrow-raising, if you ask me. It's definitely one of those spots where can Florida ramp it back up again, Connor, for a second straight week, right after a big win like that. And now Kentucky here with Will Levis and this Wildcats team that I think offense was kind of out of sorts. Their defense after, a first half where they struggled, a little bit. They gave up some plays to Miami early in that game, but they also benefited from an injury to Brett Gabbert. He got injured for Miami and didn't return in the second half in that game. So that also was allowed, I think, Kentucky to pull away because Miami had to turn to the backup quarterback, Avion Smith. And that's really when the offense started to struggle down the stretch against Kentucky. So this is a game I'm probably going to pass. I'll be honest. I've given you a lot of opinions on a lot of the games we've talked about where I'm leaning one way, or I've already bet something in one of the games that we've talked about up till this point. I pretty much have bet something on a lot of the games we've talked about, or I've at least have a lean. This one, I don't have anything really. And that's okay. I know in our comments, we've seen some people say, hey, you're going to talk about this game and not
make
have a pick. Yeah, make a pick. All that talk. Hey, they got to put up lines for every college football game. Odds makers do. We don't have to bet every college football game. We get to pick and choose what we like and what we want to put our money down on. So keep that in mind. So for me, early in the week, Florida took my money last week. I'm not in a rush to tempt them to take my money again this week. Let's put it that way. So I guess if I had to throw out the most mildest of leans, it would be toward the Gators. What do you think here, Connor, Kentucky and Florida?
Yeah, but here's the problem, right around the 4.5. I was going through a bunch of stuff last night. They just haven't been good the last years as this big a favorite. And you talked about the huge win at home. Obviously, they're back here, and I think they could win this game and cover the number. I just don't feel great about it. And I loved Florida last week. I thought they would play great, and it went down the wire. It was an unreal football game. In that one. But I think Kentucky's pretty good with Levis. I think their defense is solid. I'd have nothing here. Florida gave up some big plays, but I thought that would happen. I thought it'd kind of go back and forth. That went over the total. But at this total, at 52.5, I think the number there is pretty sharp. So I didn't have much on this one either. I think I'm going to watch. If I had to, I love what Richardson did. I thought he'd play well, and he did. But you mentioned it. After the big win, even at home, I lean there. I wish this was under a field goal. It's not. So that's one we bet numbers here. So it's a pass for me too as well.
No doubt. By the way, Mark Stoops still, I think, has the suspension in place for Chris Rodriguez, who was expected to be a big integral part of the Kentucky running back group running the football, and he didn't play last week. I don't know if his suspension is going to be lifted for this game against Florida, which we'll have to wait and see on it. So they might have to go with give me the money, pass the Cavassier smoke once again, maybe at running back here for Kentucky for this game against Florida on Saturday. Who's capable, definitely very solid running back, but Rodriguez's status still up in the air. With still that suspension, I think it's a team implemented suspension, may still be in place for him for this matchup Saturday night in the Swamp down in Gainesville against Florida. All right, Stanford and USC. How about a little Pac-12 action taking place here right now? The current line here, and this one has USC right now at around looks like 9-point favorites here, 65.5 being the total. Yeah, 9 it looks like. Actually, the total's gone up a little bit, 67.5. And I think bettors are reacting to that USC offense, how good it looked, crisp it looked at first game for Lincoln Riley as the head coach of USC, and it should look good. Lincoln Riley's offense brings the quarterback with him from Oklahoma, Caleb Williams, who knows that offense, knows that system. It's supposed to be a hand and glove type of fit, with very little adjustment, I should say, or adjusting period for that. It should be a nice seamless transition, and it sure was, but it was also a seamless transition against an absolutely hapless football team playing Rice last week, and USC did anything they wanted in that game. Their defense was opportunistic, multiple interceptions, and I think they had a one or maybe even two pick sixes in that game against Rice quarterbacks. So, if USC brings that defense as well, that's going to be interesting. I've always thought when it comes to Alex Grinch, the defensive coordinator for USC, there's another guy on the Oklahoma coaching staff that Lincoln Riley brought with him to Southern California. He's always a bit of a rambler gambler. He's like us, a bit of a gambler. Like, he takes risks with his defenses, tries to go for the interception, and sometimes they can get burned and give up a big play. He's kind of that aggressive and a little bit more heavy on the blitz as well at times. Very aggressive, risk-taking defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, but it paid off well against Rice last weekend. So we'll see how they fare here now as they go on the road to Palo Alto to face this Stanford Cardinal team that ended up with a 41-10 win against Colgate in their first game of the season. It's a Stanford team that I've obviously had a big-time struggle the last couple of seasons. We've seen them decline as a program. I think there's potential for this quarterback, Tanner McKee, who's back at the quarterback spot, was very efficient. It's against Colgate. You don't want to go crazy. They didn't play anyone of significance, but still he had 308 passing yards, 22 of 27, very efficient. The total's gone up. The only thing is we're talking now 67 and a half now with this total. And you're going to get a Stanford team that's going to be slow it down, conservative. And I'm telling you what, David Shaw, who, if they have another brutal year, this has got to be the end of the road for him at Stanford this year. But this guy is the king of 4th and 3 from the USC 40-yard line in this game, and he'll punt. Like, nobody does that anymore. 4th and 3 on the opponent's 40-yard line. You either go for it, you kick the long field, or you go for it. That's what everybody's doing these days in 2022 football. But not our good old friend David Shaw. No, 4th and 3 at the opponent 40, we're going to punt. That's what we're going to do. He still does that. I saw him do that shit last year multiple times. So that's the problem now. I think USC is a dead nuts over team because I'm still not sold on the defense. I think McKee and the Stanford offense can move the ball a bit. I think USC's offense can do damage against a Stanford defense that was horrible, how badly Stanford's defense fell off last year. So yeah. I understand this total being that high, but man, I'm having a hard time pulling the trigger because I'm seeing 67.5, and all I can think of in the back of my mind is conservative offense, slow it down. And if it's 4th and 3 on the USC 40, this bastard's going to punt David Shaw because he does this every freaking year. With the Stanford offense. But so I lean to the over. I don't know if I'll lay this many on the road with USC, but Stanford's still a wait and see. Like, this is the first time we're going to see them against someone capable. I got to see it before I'm ready to back the trees in this game. What do you think, Conor Mac? Pac-12 matchup, USC Stanford.
Yeah, I got to wait on both these teams. I know there's a lot of hype with Lincoln Riley, basically gave him everything to come to SC. And they did well. He's got Caleb Williams at quarterback. Washington's one of the best receivers there. Williams, the running back, is really good. Yeah, my problem was I didn't bet enough on that over in the Rice game I talked about. I should put way more money on that over. But you're talking about the total here now. That's really, really high. I still think there's points. And yeah, last year, Stanford's defense was not good. It had holes. But one place I like to back them is here at home. And I thought McKee was pretty good last year. And he had some moments, like you mentioned. Obviously, they beat up, who was that, Colgate, right, or whatever. They were sloppy with the ball, though. They had 2 or 3 fumbles, an interception. They got to shore that up, or it could be a long night. You know what? I didn't jump on this because I still got to wait and see these teams. I have not seen Stanford enough, obviously just one game in. But if you got over 10 here, because this line opened at 11.5, I think that's a good ticket to have in your pocket. Because I think over 10 there and Palo Alto is a good look here on Stanford.
Yeah, I get that sense too. That don't just rush to bet USC this week after what we saw against Rice. Rice is a hapless, floundering program, and Stanford. Look, Stanford, I do think is going to be a little bit better this year, but again, 41-10 against Colgate last week isn't going to tell you a whole lot. This is going to tell us a lot more. This is one of those you sit back, you watch, and you analyze, and you observe. I want to see how good USC is, and Also on the flip side, let's see if Stanford's just even a little bit better than they were last year. And obviously playing an opponent like this, is definitely going to prove that a little bit, just to how much Stanford might be or might not be improved this year. All right, next up, we've got Arizona State, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State Cowboys, 11-point home favorites here, 57.5 the total in this game. Arizona State to me is not a team I'm looking to back. Last week they played Northern Arizona. They did win and cover 40-3. They look very impressive, especially on defense. They completely shut down Northern Arizona, held them to 120 total yards. They actually might have a pretty decent defense this year, Arizona State. I'm still not totally sold on the passing ability of Emory Jones, the Florida transfer at quarterback for Arizona State, but he was efficient. He wasn't asked to do much, but 13 of 18, 152 yards last week. They did get Xavion Valladay from Wyoming. Nice running back transfer there, and he had 116 rushing yards. So they have some pieces on the skill position talent levels, but I'm not ready to trust them yet on the road now against Oklahoma State. That I think there's value with Oklahoma State here, laying 11. And I cashed a ticket last week with Central Michigan plus the points against Oklahoma State, and it was a very, very fortuitous, I would even say a fraudulent point spread cover that I didn't deserve with Central Michigan. That game was over. It was like 51-15 for Oklahoma State, and they just shut everything down, and they just totally just sleepwalked the rest of the game. And then all of a sudden, Daniel Richardson and the Central Michigan offense are moving the ball against the Oklahoma State backups, and all of a sudden they get the backdoor cover and they lose that game by less than 20. And they end up covering the number. It's one of those games where they're going to make Oklahoma State maybe a shorter favorite in this game because of that game being closer than it really should have last week against Central Michigan, because they were in control. That offense with Spencer Sanders, Connor, it looked great. It really did. I mean, early in that game, Central Michigan wasn't stopping them. I figured that this offense was going to be much better this year. Spencer Sanders' final year, make that jump maybe like a Kenny Pickett did last year, and really show that in his final year he's going to have his best season yet. And I think this is going to be a challenge for Arizona State on offense or on their defense. But on the flip side, I still have my concerns about Oklahoma State's defense. I mean, couldn't have been any easier with the over either in that game, which I also had with Central and Oklahoma State last week. Game flew over the total with plenty of room to spare. That Oklahoma State defense is still a little bit shaky. They lose the great defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who's now at Ohio State. And look at in one game what Jim Knowles did for the Ohio State defense. Look at how much better it looked in just one game against Notre Dame on Saturday. So that's a big loss to Oklahoma State, that they had that great defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, now at Ohio State, and they lost a ton of the personnel they had from that great Oklahoma State defense last year. And I think you can see that defense take a step back this year. So I'm leaning to the favorite. I'm leaning to the over here in this game with Arizona State and Oklahoma State. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, this is already moving to the over as well. I don't know, how much to make of Arizona State, and this is just not a good spot for them to go on the road here. And what about Oklahoma State? I mean, they took the foot off the gas, like you talked about, and obviously if you add Central Michigan, you cover there. They just let them score 2 or 3 touchdowns there in the fourth. Spencer Sanders was good, but this is what I have a problem with him. Even though I lean Oklahoma State, I have a problem with Spencer Sanders laying, double digits here. I lean them in Gundy. They've been very good against the number and at home. So that's my lean here, because Arizona State's just been not a very good road team, especially against the number. And I don't know what to make of them too much with the Sun Devils. So I lean Oklahoma State, but this is a pass for me early here.
All right, pass for Connor. I haven't bet it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if later this week I end up on both Oklahoma State laying the points and also the over here in this. I think you're getting a discount with Oklahoma State because after that misleading final score against Central Michigan, where all the damage Central Michigan did late in that game was against the backup defense for Oklahoma State. And now I think maybe you get a little discount on Oklahoma State, and they'll probably be locked in much more for 4 quarters this week against Arizona State.
See, there's the difference.
Last week.
Yeah. Will that defense be sharper, this week? I mean, that's why this total's moving up. So, yeah, a bunch of stuff to look at in this one.
They miss Jim Knowles. That much I am definitely 100% confident about when it comes to Oklahoma State. Losing him as defensive coordinator, and you're already seeing maybe the effects of it, and the positive of him being at Ohio State now where that defense looked already in one game against Notre Dame much better than it did at any point last year. All right, Baylor BYU next up. What a great game this is going to be. Late night on Saturday in Provo. BYU 3.5-point home favorites, 54.5 the total. Shout out to our guy on the College Football Pub Hub show on Saturdays, Big Ragu. He used BYU as his best bet last Saturday, minus 11.5 against South Florida, and that game was pretty much over after the first quarter or after halftime. I mean, that's how easy it was. Great call by Doc Big Ragu with that. Easy wire-to-wire blowout win for BYU last week against South Florida. This will be much tougher, though. BYU now facing a very good, well-coached Baylor team. I like Dave Aranda quite a bit, and what he's been able to do. Leads that Baylor team last year to a Big 12 championship, beating Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. Then they beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. Baylor's the real deal. This is a great football game. It's tough to pick a side here, quite honestly, because I really like both of these teams right now. Baylor's fine on offense, and once Jerry Bohannon transferred out because he was beaten out for the starting quarterback job by Blake Shapen, who's clearly deserved being the quarterback here at Baylor. I think he's a good choice. Again, Baylor had a pretty easy time of it last week, 69-10 against Albany. But obviously now going on the road against BYU, this will be much more difficult. Baylor took care of business last year against BYU. This is the back half of a home and home. Last year they played in Waco, and Baylor gets the 38-24 win as 6-point home favorites. They outgained BYU 534-409. Now BYU looking for some redemption here in this game. We'll see if that indeed is the case, if they can find that. The money's come in on BYU, open 2.5 up to 3.5. I'm even seeing a 4 at Circa right now for BYU as home favorites. I kind of lean BYU I don't really want to get in front of the Cougars right now. I think they're really good. Obviously, they're great in the trenches again, like always. The offensive line, defensive line. In terms of defensive returning production, they're right up there, number 1, number 2 in the country with everyone they brought back on defense this year. That's significant. But they're going to be tested by Shapen, a very good quarterback and a good Baylor offense. So it's a great football game. I lean BYU. I think if I had gotten below a field goal, I'm more interested in BYU at that number. At more than a field goal now, I just like Baylor too much to really want to take or lay more than a field goal against them in a matchup of this magnitude. That Baylor team is just very well coached, and that defense, gave Jaron Hall and BYU some fits last year. See if they can duplicate that. But it's a great Saturday night matchup. What are you thinking here, Connor? Baylor, BYU?
Yeah, this is one of the better games here on Saturday night. You mentioned, I remember that game last year, Baylor 38-24. Hall's got to be big, obviously, here at home. I think there's a lot of love how BYU looked, though, in that opener. And one thing with Baylor last year that was so good, their defense was phenomenal, and defense carries, and they played well on the road, and they were always in those games on the road. I believe they lost by 10 to Oak State. That was it. Other than that, they won on the road or very close, under 3 points. So this is too much, even though I think this is a great game, and I think it comes down to the wire. This is moved to 3.5. I want the points here early with Baylor, just off look. And like you said, it's moved 3.5, maybe it touches 4. I think they're disrespecting Baylor a little bit, so I like the points here.
All right, liking Baylor here, plus the points. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely now with it above a field goal, a little bit more leery about the BYU side, even though they're in revenge mode for last year, and even though they looked extremely impressive, obviously in week 1 against South Florida. They're very good on both sides of the ball, but again, so is Baylor. So it's a great game. Looking forward to it on Saturday night. All right, Oregon State and Fresno State next up here. We've got Oregon State, looks like right now 1-point road favorites here, 60.5 being the total in this game. Very interesting. It is Oregon State, Fresno State. So when you there we go. So we'll go with that. But yeah, Oregon State, Fresno State. Look, Oregon State, extremely impressive. I was in on the Beavers once that line came down to close to pick 'em in that game. Oregon State pick 'em -1, 60.5, 61 the total in this one. But money coming in a little bit on Oregon State, and can they win on the road? I think this team has gotten to a point where we can trust them maybe a little bit more on the road than we used to. I mean, if you actually go back and look at this Oregon State Beavers team last season, they started to put themselves in spots to win road games. They weren't that team that, when Jonathan Smith first got there, obviously they had a hard time winning on the road. But you look at them all of a sudden recently, they had the big road win at USC last year. Keep that in mind. They've gradually been able to improve. Now, a lot of their damage still is done at home. I still think if that Oregon State defense plays like they did against Boise, and they'll have to, because to be honest, they're playing a better offense. There's no question. Jake Haener and Fresno State's offense is much better, at least on paper to me, than what we saw from Boise last week. So this is going to be a good test for Oregon State on the road, playing Fresno. I think they can get this done. I'm just not looking to step in front of the Beavers, not after what I saw last week. Chance Nolan and the offense looked solid. They were opportunistic. Their defense completely shut down Hank Bachmeier, and the Boise State offense made them look silly, to be quite honest with you, in that game. And I still think Fresno's defense is still a little bit of a weak spot for them. Keep in mind, Cal Poly last week, first half in that game, they were moving the ball against Fresno's defense a little bit. I do think Oregon State's got the better defense, and I think their offense will move it. I don't think they'll completely shut down Haener and the Bulldogs offense, which is very good. I don't think there's very little drop-off in the coaching, because Caleb DeBoer, now with Washington, former Fresno head coach, Jeff Tedford, back in the saddle here, again, as Fresno State head coach. But he's obviously been with this program before. It's not that big of a transition. Like Fresno a lot, but I don't think their defense matches up with Oregon State. That could be the difference in this one. Haven't bet this game yet, but I'm leaning to the road team here at a pick 'em Oregon State. What do you think here, Connor?
This is where I've kind of learned, if with Oregon State, just to stay off this one. Could they go in there and win? I think they're a little bit better, but I think you watch this one. Fresno always solid at home. Like you said, they didn't look great against Cal Poly, but they have Haener back there. What I look to in this game is the over. I think they'll be able to score a little bit. I know Oregon State looked good. They're just mistakes by Boise, but I think they'll be able to score on Fresno, and I think Haener will be able to score some points here. Fresno, not good as a home favorite, but that's usually they're laying a huge number. They're not laying anything here. And Oregon State, we talked about their last year, 1-5 ATS on the road. Should be a phenomenal game. Just not one I might look to bet, but I lean over here a little bit. Something I could get to Saturday night.
All right, good stuff. Before we get to that Arizona game, we'll go first to Boston College, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech 3-point home favorites, 46 the total in this one. I ain't laying 3 with Virginia Tech. I mean, I know they're trying to bounce back. It was a disheartening loss against Old Dominion, and really it was a kind of an unfortunate loss for Virginia Tech, because they actually outgained Old Dominion. They did a lot of things. They moved the ball at times. They actually shut down Hayden Wolf and the Old Dominion offense much of that game. But again, Old Dominion gets a blocked kick return for a touchdown, helping their cause in that game. There was a lot of special teams breakdowns and miscues for Virginia Tech that ended up going against them in that game and contributed to that upset loss that they suffered against Old Dominion. They do look like they're going to have a pretty solid defense this season, because their defense, I thought, even in defeat last week, 20-17, played well. Old Dominion got the fumble recovery touchdown. Like I said, they got some short fields to work with. Really, the only time Old Dominion's offense fluidly moved the football down the field was the time when Virginia Tech couldn't afford it to happen. And that was the game-winning drive in the final couple minutes of the fourth quarter. They finally put a really good drive together, Old Dominion, and that was enough to get the win. But when you look at the box score, 19-14 first downs for Virginia Tech. They outgained Old Dominion, 344 yards, just 245 for Old Dominion. It was just turnovers and some special teams miscues. Again, there's another thing that's gone downhill ever since Frank Beamer retired. All of a sudden, the special teams has been a debacle for Virginia Tech over the years. So they'll try to bounce back from that game against Old Dominion. I don't think it'll be easy. Now, Boston College, off a tough loss for them. They were in control most of the game against Rutgers. They let it slip late. Rutgers puts a drive together and ends up getting the victory, 22-21 over Boston College. BC, 9-point favorites. They lose outright. tough loss, pretty bad loss too, because Rutgers was down Noah Vidral. Their starting running back didn't play. They were very banged up on offense, Rutgers, and they still went on the road and beat Boston College. BC had some offensive line issues going into that game. They reared their ugly head. Rutgers defense was blowing up the line of scrimmage. That's definitely a concern for me here for BC. That offensive line going up against Virginia Tech's defense, which, like I said, I thought they did play pretty well for much of that game against Old Dominion, even though they didn't win. So that being said, the offense is a work in progress for Vatech. Grant Wells is not a bet on quarterback for me. We've talked about that. He makes too many mistakes. We saw it again last week against Old Dominion. Way too many mistakes from the Marshall transfer, Grant Wells. So I lean to Boston College +3, and I would think this game probably stays under the total. Rutgers Boston College went under the total last week. Virginia Tech Old Dominion went under the total last week. This total 46. I think it's probably a lower scoring game here as well. BC and Virginia Tech. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I lean under here as well. The thing is, BC, are you kidding me? Nothing in the second half. I mean, they were up, 21-15 and just zero in that second half. Hats off to Rutgers. I think there's a little value with Boston College. I mean, Tech's always good at home, and basically they're saying, this is a pick and you get the 3 points at home here. This is a game I don't want to look to bet on. Like you said, I'd lean under. You talked about Wells. Holy shit. I mean, he had, 4 picks and a fumble. They had 14 penalties. I mean, it was horrible. 5 of 16. Third down, I put that down last night. Like, this team is not very good right now. And if you have Wells at quarterback, I don't think you're going to be very good. So, yeah, I'd look under here.
Now, I will admit, I think Jeff Hafley has had some. His coaching is starting to come into a little bit of a question as well. But Brent Pry, that was a debacle. I mean, you're trying to put a nice first impression on Virginia Tech, the fan base and the program, and that's the effort you trot out there. Penalties, bonehead decisions, terrible 4 interceptions, and 21 of 37 passing for Grant Wells. Terrible. Like I said, this guy's a mistake waiting to happen. I saw it too many times at Marshall. I'll take Phil Jerkovic to make that extra. Now, he struggled again down the stretch, Jerkovic, but again, the O-line was an impediment to them. I still will take Jerkovic at the quarterback spot any day of the week over Grant Wells. That could end up being the difference here. So, like I said, BC and the under would be the lean for me in this one, and Connor seems to like that under as well. All right, Mississippi State, Arizona. We've got Arizona, 10.5-point home favorites, or road favorites, I should say, 11. Now, this game in Tempe, out in the desert. Interesting travel spot, Starkville to Tempe, Arizona. But Mississippi State's taking all the money. 7.5-point road favorites, now up to 11, 59.5 the total. Usually when I make bets early in the week, it's because I think I'm going to get the best of the number and good closing line value. That's not going to be the case for me here. And you got to be willing to admit when you misread the market. I misread this. I bet over 61 early Monday morning, and this total has gone down to 59, so I'm stuck with a bad number. It's one of the few that I haven't gotten the line move correct. Like, I got in on Kansas and the over with West Virginia in that game way before the line move, but this one went against me here. I still think points could be scored. I like that Jaden DeLora offense that we saw from Arizona last week. That was supposed to be a very good San Diego State defense. Jaden DeLora is carving up the Aztecs. I mean, that was up and down the field. That was just destroying what was supposed to be a pretty solid defensive team. They had good balance in that offense. I think their skill position talent has gone up big time, Arizona, this season. And for them to play the way they did against San Diego State's defense, 38-20, and rack up the yardage they did. Jaden DeLora, magnificent, 299 passing yards, 4 touchdown passes, 1 interception. They had success running the football. DJ Williams was very good in that regard. How about the day for Jacob Cowing? 8 receptions, 152 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. The UTEP transfer, where he was a very big-time target for Gavin Hardison last year at UTEP. And look at the way he played last week with Jaden DeLora in that Arizona offense. Just very impressive. But I want to point something out. Before we get too excited about Arizona's performance, Mississippi State's a whole hell of a lot better than San Diego State. All right, this is going to be a much different challenge. Coming into the season, I probably had Mississippi State, I would say, a good, in terms of ahead of Arizona, a good probably 20 points almost, 18 to 20 points better than Arizona. And now all of a sudden, look, Arizona has a very impressive week 1 against San Diego State, and now Mississippi State's only laying, 11 now. So there's been an adjustment to how good Arizona looked. But the thing that concerns me is Arizona defensively was great last week, but their strength is the defensive line. Their strength is stopping the run, and they stopped the run. That's how you beat San Diego State. Burmeister couldn't do anything in the passing game. That's always how you're going to beat San Diego State. You stop them from running the football, you're going to beat them. And Arizona did that. And they have a good run defense. But last year, as much as I like where Jed Fish's team is headed, last year they could not defend the pass. They really couldn't. The secondary was a weak link for Arizona. They got shredded a lot of times in the passing game of opposing teams. And guess what they're going to face here? Pretty much exclusively Mississippi State throwing the football in the air raid under Mike Leach. Can they defend the pass? They couldn't last year. Are they improved enough where they can contain this air raid pass offense with Will Rogers, which just sliced and diced their way through Memphis last week in that big blowout win? That's the concern for me, which is why I bet this over, because I think Mississippi State will move the ball through the air. I think Arizona's much improved offense can do enough damage, yet the betting markets bet this thing under. And I don't agree with that. So I lean over. As far as the side goes, I was on Arizona last week. I loved Arizona last week. I think I want to see them stack up against Mississippi State before wanting to back them again here. Conor Mac, what do you think? Mississippi State, Arizona.
I'm with the air on the total. I think you got to look over in this one. I think Will Rogers, they'll do what they want. That's the one problem with Arizona. I just don't think they can, stop the pass. They didn't have to in the San Diego State game. But you mentioned Delora. I loved him at Washington State, and he can really throw it. I mean, this kid's talented. You talked about Cowing and Singer had huge games. I think they'll make some plays. But if you liked Arizona, you missed the boat. You could have got 14.5, 14. This has dropped to 11. You still think there's value with the 10 points? Maybe here at home. Mississippi State was good on the road last year. But now they're laying numbers, kind of, big numbers like this on the road. So a little bit different. They're the better team. I just don't know if there are 2 touchdowns, cover this number on the road. But, yeah, should be a good one. One I'm probably going to stay off. I might get to the over in this. I'm going to look through it a little more.
All right, that's a good one. That's another good one in the late night hours. It's 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific on Saturday night. Very late kickoff there. Very intriguing game here. Bulldogs and the Wildcats there in Arizona. All right, we just got a couple games left. Old Dominion, East Carolina. We've got ECU here, 12.5-point home favorites at home against Old Dominion. 50.5 the total in this one. And just an absolutely excruciating loss for East Carolina against NC State, where if they have a kicker that is able to do his job properly, they probably beat NC State. And instead, missed field goal at the end, a missed extra point right before that would have tied the game at 21. I mean, just beyond gut-wrenching. And now it's the job of Mike Houston to try to get this team amped up again for another big game here after just a crushing loss against NC State, where they had a million chances to win and the kicking game let them down. And it just ruined what was a sparkling defensive performance throughout that game, and especially in the second half by East Carolina. I mean, they shut down NC State's offense didn't do a thing in the second half of that game. A couple of goal line stands as well. I mean, NC State kept getting short fields because they were stopping East Carolina's offense deep in their own territory, and then East Carolina was stopping them at the goal line. And please, for the love of God, I've got to rant about this a little bit. And NC State did this, and I'm still seeing it on 4th and short. Florida State got into trouble doing this against LSU. Can we stop with shotgun on 4th and 1 and 4th and goal from the 1-yard line? Can we stop with the quarterback lined up in the shotgun? Can we stop? It's ridiculous. It's totally absurd. What happened to putting the quarterback under center and just letting him just dive into the end zone head first for a touchdown? Nice and simple. Nice and easy. You already put yourself behind the 8 ball, lined up with the quarterback in shotgun, 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage when you need 1 yard at the goal line. Do you know how asinine that is? And yet coaches still do this shit. And it's constant, and it's got to stop. It's got to end. especially when you're seeing teams just screw it up like NC State did when they went shotgun, 4th and goal at the 1. When Florida State fumbled what should have been the end of the game against LSU on Sunday night in a shotgun snap at the goal line. It's enough. It's simple. Put the quarterback under center and sneak the ball over the goal line. It's not complicated. This isn't rocket science. This isn't brain surgery. We should be able to put our brains together, screw in, and figure this shit out. Anyway, that's enough of that. Old Dominion. They are in just as much, Conor Mac, a bet against spot, as in my opinion, as East Carolina going into this game. East Carolina, a brutal loss for them. But Old Dominion's coming off one of the biggest wins they'll have, beating Virginia Tech. Now, it's not Virginia Tech that is like they used to be in terms of how good they are, but a huge win. To me, these are two teams I'd probably want to bet against in a spot like this, and I'm not sure I can pick one to bet against. But, Connor, this is a game that you specifically wanted on the list today because you had an angle and you had something you wanted to mention about it. What are you thinking here, ODU, ECU?
Yeah, well, we talked about it. I was worried last week of Old Dominion. That's why I wasn't all over. I wanted more than a touchdown. Obviously, they took care of business at the 6th there. When they went up against better competition, they lost. They would get beat up. And they didn't play great teams down the stretch, obviously. That's just their schedule. But they played well. And we mentioned all those Voltech turnovers. 5 turnovers, Wells, 5 of 16 and 3rd down, all the penalties. So this one was interesting to me because I thought they played good enough on defense. Can they do that here? I don't know if they cover the number, but I like the under because I was so impressed with East Carolina's defense. They were just as good or better than NC State, which basically was 15th in the country last year, and they moved the ball. So I think they'll be able to move it. Where they cover this, 11.5, I'm not so sure. I think they win, but I think this is a good football game, and Old Dominion can hang around. But I like the under here, 52.5.
Right, liking the under here, points to be at a premium. I can get on board with that. I think East Carolina's got one hell of a defense potentially this year. What they did in the second half against NC State was impressive, and I'm still not a big fan of Holton Ahlers, to be quite honest with you. And the offense, it's a solid offense. It's not an explosive offense. It's not a a dynamic offense necessarily. So I think it's an East Carolina team that's probably going to be more reliant on defense. And we saw Old Dominion, actually defensively played well, but the offense was spotty, and they struggled to move the ball at times against Virginia Tech, especially much of that game until the 4th quarter. If East Carolina's defense plays like it did last week, it could be tough for Old Dominion to be marching the football up and down the field. So
yeah,
might be onto something, Connor, with that under. I think that might be a good look there. All right, final game for hitting the books for this week, Marshall and Notre Dame. We've got Notre Dame 20.5-point home favorites here in South Bend. The total in this game currently sitting at, it looks like 51.5 is what we're looking at here with the total here, Marshall and Notre Dame. It looks like it's stayed pretty steady around that 51.5 mark. Notre Dame, here's another team. Are you ready to win by 3 touchdowns or more coming off the grueling, exhausting, much heavily hyped game that it was last week for them against Ohio State? And I thought Notre Dame's defense, I was impressed. I mean, I know Jackson Smith and Jigba was injured early in that game, and it really threw. You can't lose just one player and say, oh, we're done for. You got to have, that's next man up mentality. I don't want to hear Ohio State offense using that excuse that, oh, we struggled because Smith and Jigba got injured early in that game. Bullshit. Next man up and give Notre Dame's defense credit. How about that? Maybe they played well. Maybe they influenced the way your offense played last week. So I give Notre Dame's defense a ton of credit. Absolutely. It was an outstanding performance against what was supposed to be one of the most explosive offenses in the country. And to hold them to 21 points, even though they lost the game 21-10, to hold Ohio State to 21 points, C.J. Stroud had just 223 passing yards in that game. I thought they balled out. They played their asses off on that side of the football. Marcus Freeman has to be proud of his team on the defensive side of the football. Now, on the offensive side, that's another story. They struggled. They had a tough time in that game. Buckner was only 10 of 18, 177 passing yards. They could not get the ground game going. Chris Tyree with just 6 carries for 28 yards rushing. That's certainly not going to cut it. Now, you're not facing Ohio State and their improved defense this time. You're facing Marshall, who last year, if you remember, defense was at times optional for them. We'll see if that Marshall team has improved on the defensive side of the football. On offense, I think they could be pretty good because now they don't have Grant Wells as their quarterback anymore. He's gone. His disasters are elsewhere. Charles Huff, the head coach, doesn't have to worry about that anymore with Marshall, that headache that is Grant Wells trying to run your offense. No, instead now he's got the Texas Tech transfer, Henry Colombi here, or Colombi, I should say, as the quarterback for Marshall. And I think he's a big upgrade. This is a guy stuck behind multiple solid quarterbacks at Texas Tech. Now is getting his opportunity at Marshall.
And I thought he played well, though, too, when he got in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, last year I thought he played well when he had the opportunity. So this is just one of those spots where it's a little dubious here to be laying 3 touchdowns. I'm leaning Marshall. I'm concerned that Notre Dame's defense is excellent and Marshall's defense may be barely average, if that. And if that's the case, even Notre Dame's offense, which struggled last week on the road at Ohio State, could be able to move the ball against a weaker Marshall defense. But I think Marshall offense, if they could be down, let's say 30 to 7 late in the game. And the offense, I think, has a capability, Marshall, to punch in a late touchdown and get you through the back door if need be. So it's just not the spot after that big matchup with Ohio State that I'm looking to lay 3 touchdowns. I haven't bet it yet, but I'm leaning toward Marshall here, especially if this hits 21 or higher. What do you think here, Conor Mac? Marshall, Notre Dame?
This might get there, too. I think Notre Dame obviously wins this game. I think Buckner, they'll be able to score on Marshall, I think, pretty easy. But I think Marshall might be able to get some points. But I was super impressed how Notre Dame's defense played. You talked about it against Ohio State. So this is interesting here. I never loved laying these points with Notre Dame. And then I haven't seen enough, even though their defense played well, the offense didn't do much. And, surprise, Ohio State's defense did well, but is that more of Notre Dame's offense, needs to get in rhythm. And this is a good game to do that in this one. So this one to me, I don't love really at all. I need more points with Marshall, like you talked about. Give me over 24.5. Maybe I'll start thinking about it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Charles Huff now is his second year as head coach at Marshall. He coached under Saban at Alabama before this. So, he's got he learned from a good person to learn from for sure. And to be honest with you, Marshall is one of those teams that I think because they are moving to the Sun Belt this year, they've kind of been discounted, discredited. I think that's a solid football team. Now, again, their defense last year concerned me. Their offense, I think this year is pretty good. It's just going to be, can that defense, give them a chance here to hang within 3 scores? I think they could. And again, Notre Dame's offense, it's a work in progress. Let's be honest. It is. There's no question about that. Looks to be like it could be a little bit of a work in progress on that side of the football. You thought Jack Cohen, left a lot to be desired at quarterback for Notre Dame last year. That was a rough debut for Buckner. I expected a little bit better because I kept hearing he's got this great athletic ability and he's got a decent arm, and we just saw him really, really scuffle for a large part. He had a really good drive early in the game, early second quarter for their 1 touchdown, and after that, really didn't do much. 177 passing yards. He ran the ball 11 times, Buckner, and only picked up 18 yards on those 11 carries. So, yeah, looks like a bit of a work in progress here for the Notre Dame offense. But they are taking a step down in defensive class, and they're back home here against Marshall. But I still lean to the points here with the Thundering Herd. All right, great stuff. That is hitting the books here for this Week 2 edition. And our new time slot's perfect. Like, we can stretch the show out now to an hour and a half or so, maybe a little bit longer, an hour and a half to 2 hours, perfect amount of time, be able to really dissect the games and go through as many of them as possible. Hit the like button. We appreciate it. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Poker Addicted, Christopher Comatini, Williams Wrestling, Don Play, Andrew G, Ron Crawford. Good to see Ron Crawford in the chat. Coin, Dabby Cab. He, of course, hosts all our great college football live streams. Sky Dragon, North Ender, Nasty Nate, James S, Mike M, Viper NB, Top Set, Let's Go Wild Picks, Teaser King, Moose Money, who, of course, is part of our college live streams as well. Great stuff. Ronnie and Bergia, we appreciate it. Gaming Heavy, TransCanada, Jake Kaiser, G. Martinez, and everybody else. We appreciate it very much. Hit the like button. We will wrap up the show in just a second, but first, we'll have a few words from our sponsors. Southtown 101, when you're in San Antonio, Texas, stop in. Great food, drinks, live music, DJs, karaoke. Southtown 101. Manscaped, promo code PubSports, 20% off your purchase. Lawnmower 4.0, any Manscaped product, 20% off with promo code PubSports. That'll wrap it up for another edition of Hitting the Books, college football style. I know there's people asking, Ian, can you do NFL? This is going to be college football. On my own channel, my own YouTube channel, I do my own Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy show, and I break down every NFL game on the board every week starting this Thursday. So if you want my NFL analysis, watch that, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy on my YouTube channel later this week. You'll get my NFL thoughts, but we appreciate it nevertheless. Thanks to everyone for joining us here at College Football Hitting the Books. We got Sharpie, Prize Picks, Say Hey Plays coming up here on Pub Sports Radio later today. Jimmy the Bag and his brand new colleague and co-host, Andy Molitor, for gambling, Gridiron Gamblers, I should say. Pub Sports Radio's weekly NFL Tuesday night show is back with Jimmy the Bag, new co-host, Andy Molitor, 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Make sure you tune in for that. Every NFL game on the board. Week 1 is here, baby. The contest, don't forget to sign up for that as well. Or the Survivor. There's the Survivor contest. There's the 5 picks per week against the spread NFL contest as well. Make sure you get involved with that. But tons going on at Pub Sports Radio. Make sure you support the shows. Make sure you support the channel and the merch store. Don't forget about that as well for Pub Sports Radio. Lots of great merch. Get yourself some as well. Conor Mac, final thoughts before we say goodbye.
No, I'm pumped. That was a great week 1. And yeah, solid. Plenty of time. We'll be here this was a Tuesday one-off. Every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern, we will be on. So it should be great the rest of the way. And let's kick ass this week. And we will see you guys right before kickoff, 10 Eastern on Saturday morning. Can't wait to get it, my guy.
Absolutely. Pub Up. Ian Cameron, Conor Mac, DJ Big Boss, Big Ragu, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern. Once again, college football Pub Up. Looking forward to that. And a reminder, we're back at our regular day and time for Hitting the Books next week, Monday, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. Pacific. Mondays, that is going to be the day and the time of the show each week, Hitting the Books moving forward. For Conor Mac, I'm Ian Cameron. Great job by Big Show behind the scenes producing this show, this great show. Hope you all enjoyed it. I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week, and we'll see you again Saturday for the College Football Pub Up right here on Pub Sports Radio.